If you're still struggling right now to know if Jesus really does love you, it's okay. I understand that struggle. I went through it too. Then one day it just dawned in my head after all of those therapies, I got a gift from God. I'm trying to give it back. You know, take it, unwrap it, celebrate it, thank God for it. Because once you accept your sexual orientation, even though it feels weird to you and weird to society, it's wonderful. I've been in love with the same guy for 30 years now. Very much. All some of you applauded for him, because you know what it's been, never mind, 30 years, he's a poor guy. But during that 30 years, we began to realize right early on that it was the church that I had been working for that was the enemy. And that it was the church and its propaganda against gay people. Remember, it's not Jesus who's doing this. It's people who are followers of Jesus. Like Gandhi said, you know, I really like Jesus, but his followers are really tough to take. Especially since they don't look like him at all. And so, you know, once Gary and I realized, when I was in the closet, meaning when I wasn't accepting my sexuality, I started ghostwriting books for people because I didn't want to be public with my gayness, and I was afraid that I would come out and I would destroy somebody's ministry, so I went into the closet and I started ghostwriting books for Billy Graham and these other guys. Because I was a writer, I wasn't a good writer, but I was fast and I finished. And that was really the only difference between you and writers is you don't want to sit there that long, you know. And I finished these books, and as I was, you know, working with these guys, I think God has a tremendous sense of humor. Because I was sitting with the enemy. And the enemy was learning to love me and care for me. Now, I'm not talking about Billy Graham, by the way. Billy Graham is another whole cat. This guy is real. And over I learned from him, never once did he talk about gay people as being bad. Now, you put that up against Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson and the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church. And, you know, so we started collecting what they were saying about us. Let me give you some samples. Now, if you can't stand any more of it, don't listen. But I think you ought to hear what they're saying about us today. Today. If they were saying this about Jews, they would be in prison. If they were saying this thing about a minority, African Americans or Latino Americans, they would be arrested. Right? Have you listened to this? I just have a few of them that I think you ought to hear. You know, here's the United Methodist Church with all their Wesleyan background. Wesley was a pioneer who came to work with the Native Americans. Wesley was a guy who was out there in the front being, you know, serving Christ, doing justice. Now they say, the United Methodist Church, with 15 million American members, does not condone the practice of homosexuality and considers this practice incompatible with Christian teaching. Therefore, self-avowed practicing, I'm a self-avowed practicing homosexual. Although I'm not practicing anymore, I learned how. They have to be certified as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve in the United Methodist Church, and they will not marry us. And they're holding trials to condemn people like Jimmy Creech, who was the chairman of the board of Soulforce, a straight guy who had the biggest church in Nebraska, United Methodist, and he married a gay couple. And they put him on trial twice, defrocked him, took away his pension, took away his calling, and sent him out into the world because this guy had courage. They're still making martyrs on our behalf. And I've been arrested at more of those trials because you sit there long enough, you just have to go out and say, we're going to stop this trial. Jimmy Creech, we stopped this trial. We had about 200 Soulforce people. They had this trial in this godforsaken town in the North Pole with polar bears and everything because they didn't want the media. So they held it up there thinking they would escape us. So we went up there, about 200 of us, and we were going to close down the trial before it started because a bus was coming with the 2 bishops and all of the pastors that were going to serve on the jury. Okay? So we surrounded the church, and we thought it would just be us Soulforce people, and all of a sudden, United Methodist ministers and their husbands or wives began to join us. They said, "We are so ashamed of our church. We're so ashamed of what's happening here. Can we join you?" And we said, "Yes, you be in the front rows." Because no, that's not true. Not stupid. I wanted those bishops and all those clergy to get out there and see all their friends and neighbors, their own pastors, standing there. I wanted them to see not Soulforce people, gay people who I could just discount, but Methodist people. There was a lady there, 89. She told me later she was 89. She looked ancient, but she had sparkle, you know. The first day we closed down that trial, she came running up to me and handed me $400 in $20 bills and said, "This is to bail out you people, because I just got this from the ATM machine. It's all I could get." And so I took the 400, and we needed thousands to bail out that day, so she was really helpful. The next day she came with money in her hand, and I reached out for it, and she ran right past me and said, "No, this time it's for me." That 89-year-old lady got arrested, and it was so thrilling to see the look on her face. I'm taking a stand. It's a symbolic stand to be arrested in a place like this. This isn't what the African Americans went through during the Civil Rights Movement. This is not being thrown in jail and suffering like Black Americans suffered. This is not like that. But it's media-driven street theater. And we get arrested and we get charged and we have to go to jail and all that stuff, but it's symbolic. So I'm not comparing it, you know. But to see somebody stand up against their own church teachings, something happens to you when you start doing justice for somebody else, whether you're gay or straight. When you take a stand for somebody else's freedom, for somebody else's integrity, for somebody else's rights, something happens to you. And that Methodist lady, you know, I'll bet she's still alive, about 120 now. Still, boy, was that fun.